uncovering the truth, piece by piece, in the world of mysteries.
You're lying in bed now. The room is dark, and the hum of the night surrounds you. Everything is still. Everything is quiet. Your thoughts drift slowly, drifting away from today, drifting into history, into a moment the world almost ended. Not because of war, not because of missiles, but because someone typed the wrong number. Tonight, we're going to visit a moment that history barely remembers. A moment when a man in a dimly lit room, stopped World War III by noticing a typo. So close your eyes, get comfortable, and let me tell you the story. Slowly, softly, one word at a time. This is the forgotten night of 1979. The year a sleepy man stopped nuclear fire, just in time. Welcome to the Cold War. Welcome to the edge of silence. The Cold War was not a war of tanks or trenches. It was a war of waiting, of watching, of fear. It was a war where silence was the loudest weapon. It began after World War II, when the world was tired but still afraid. Two giants emerged, the United States and the Soviet Union. They did not fire missiles at each other, but they aimed them always. Thousands of warheads, enough to end human life, many times over. They built early warning systems, satellites, radars, machines to detect the first strike, so they could fire back before they died. These machines worked fast, too fast for humans. The moment a missile was detected, the system had minutes to decide. Is this real? Should we launch? One mistake could end the world. One wrong signal, one false alarm, and millions would vanish before they even opened their eyes. That's why people were afraid to sleep. Presidents, commanders, technicians in bunkers, all lived with one thought. Will tonight be the night? No one wanted to fire first, but no one wanted to fire second either. So both sides prepared, day after day, year after year. Some built bunkers underground. Some trained children to hide under desks. Some tested sirens every morning just in case. The Cold War was not cold at all. It burned quietly, through nervous fingers, through blinking red lights, through tired eyes staring at screens, and deep beneath the surface, in the heart of America, was NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. NORAD was a fortress, built inside a mountain, steel doors, rooms the size of stadiums, screens everywhere, tracking the sky. They watched every plane, every satellite, every possible missile, every moment of every night. It was here, inside NORAD, that the world came closest to its end. Not because of an enemy, but because of a single, simple mistake. It was November 9th, 1979. Just another cold, quiet night. Inside NORAD, technicians sat in front of glowing screens, watching, waiting, as they always did. Suddenly, one of the radar systems flashed, then another, and another. The message was clear. Soviet missile attack in progress. 200 warheads. Inbound. Phones rang. Officers shouted. Jet pilots were told to prepare. Submarines moved into launch positions. The president's alert team was being contacted. Everything in place for nuclear retaliation, except one thing. Something felt wrong. A young technician, half asleep but sharp-eyed, noticed a strange detail. The radar's alert didn't match real-world tracking. There were no satellite confirmations, no sound, no heat signatures. He looked at the data file. Its name was Simulation 198. That wasn't a real threat. That was a training program, a fake scenario. The technician ran a system check, and there it was, a human error. Someone had mistakenly loaded a training tape into the live warning system. Instead of Simulation 018, they had loaded 198. One small typo, one misplaced number. The computer believed it was real. All the alerts, all the panic, all the jets and codes and trembling hands. Triggered by a test file, not an attack, not a war, just a typo. The technician sounded the alarm. But this time, to cancel the alert, he urged a full system reset. He begged for a pause. Something's wrong, he said. Don't launch. Not yet. For 2 long minutes, the room froze. No one breathed. Fingers hovered over launch keys, eyes locked on blinking lights. Then, the radar cleared. No missiles, no attack, only silence. On the main screen, a message appeared. Simulation ended. That was it. World War III had been cancelled. Because one man looked twice. Imagine for a moment. He hadn't noticed the file. No pause. No second check. Only fear. And launch codes. The president would have been woken. He would have had minutes to decide. Strike back now, or wait and die. He likely would have chosen to retaliate. Not out of anger, but because delay meant death. It was policy. Mutually assured destruction. Missiles would have launched from silos in the Midwest, from submarines hidden in oceans, from Europe, from everywhere. They would cross the sky in under 30 minutes. Flying faster than sound, faster than thought. No time to run, no time to hide. Major cities would disappear. Washington, Moscow, New York, London, gone, in flames. Hospitals, schools, bridges, museums, gone in seconds. Millions would die instantly. More in the days that followed. Fires, radiation, collapse, silence. And for what? A training tape, a typo. One number in the wrong place. The skies would turn dark, ash blocking the sun. A nuclear winter, cold, starvation, silence. The machines would stop. The cities would crumble. The world would sleep, not gently, but forever. No one would know the mistake. No one would remember the man. No one left to ask, what happened? The earth would continue to spin, silent, empty, not because of hate, but because of haste. But that didn't happen, because someone looked again. Someone paused. Someone cared. His name was never revealed. The man who saved the world, by catching a typo, at 3 a.m., in a cold bunker, with tired eyes. He didn't receive a medal. No newspaper wrote his name. No parade marched for him. No one called him a hero, but he was. After the incident, he was quietly transferred. No thank you speech, just another desk, in another room, watching another screen. Some say he never told anyone. Some say even his family didn't know. Maybe he thought it wasn't important, or maybe he just didn't want the attention. He may have died decades later, in silence, in peace, unnoticed, but not forgotten. Because in that one moment, he chose caution over fear, reason over panic. He gave the world a second chance. And he wasn't the only one. There were others. Other quiet men and women, in quiet rooms, who made quiet decisions that saved us all. People like Stanislav Petrov, the Soviet officer who ignored a nuclear alert in 1983 because his gut told him, this doesn't feel right. They didn't act like heroes. They weren't loud. They weren't brave in battle, but they were calm, thoughtful, human. History doesn't always remember them. But maybe tonight, as we lie here in peace, we can. Because peace isn't kept by bombs, or governments, or weapons. It's kept by people who stop and think. What if I told you this wasn't the only time the world nearly ended? What if I told you history is full of invisible moments, thin threads, where everything almost snapped? You wouldn't know, because they didn't make headlines. Because someone caught it, because someone paused, because silence is rarely remembered. There was the day a Soviet radar mistook the sun for a missile. The day a Norwegian rocket was confused for a nuclear strike. The day a bear climbed a fence and triggered an alert. Yes, a bear, a real one. In 1962, at a US base in Minnesota, a guard saw something moving at the fence. He thought it was sabotage. He pulled the alarm. Missiles were readied. Pilots scrambled. It took 8 full minutes to realize it was a hungry bear. And what about 1983? Stanislav Petrov. He sat alone in a dark control room. His screen lit up. Missile inbound. Not 1, 5. He didn't panic. He didn't report it. He waited. And the world owes him everything. Petrov died in 2017, alone, in a small Moscow apartment. No statues, no ceremony, just quiet. History doesn't reward the quiet ones. It remembers those who shout, but it's the silent watchers who save us. So tonight, let's remember them, not as soldiers, not as politicians, but as guardians of calm. And maybe, just maybe, every time we pause, every time we think instead of react, we carry a little of them with us. In every story so far, a human saved us. A tired man, a quiet officer, a skeptical technician. But what if they hadn't been there? What if the decision was left to a machine? No second thoughts, no hesitation, just code, cold logic, launch, now. During the Cold War, we built computers to think faster than us, to see missiles before we could blink, to fire before we could decide. We called it safety deterrence. But we were building systems that replaced reflection with reaction. NORAD had a system called WOPR, War Operation Plan Response. It could simulate nuclear war scenarios, millions of times, in seconds. It had one job: calculate the cost of hesitation and suggest action before action was too late. But machines don't feel, they don't flinch, they don't wonder, could this be a mistake? They only follow patterns, inputs. If A, then B. Missile detected, gives fire. No time for doubt, no room for doubt. Humans doubt, humans pause. Humans save the world by hesitating. And yet, we keep building smarter machines, faster systems, AI decision makers, autonomous drones, nuclear logic, without a conscience. What happens when the next Petrov is an algorithm? Who teaches the machine to say, wait? Who tells it to feel uncertainty, to think maybe it's not what it seems? In 2025, some nuclear nations still use systems built in the 1980s, still running on floppy disks, still trusting blinking lights. And some are upgrading faster, smarter, less human, more machine. We built these systems to protect us, but who protects us from the systems? That's not science fiction. That's the world you and I live in right now, while you lie in bed, listening. It's quiet now, but that's how it always starts. The end doesn't come with noise. It comes with a blinking light and a silence. No one interrupts. Not every alert had an explanation. Not every red light had a missile behind it. Sometimes the machines screamed, and no one ever figured out why. The ghost alerts, whispers from wires, warnings from nowhere. They happened more than we admit. In 1980, just months after the Typo incident, NORAD's screens flashed again. 200 missiles. Then they disappeared. Then they reappeared. Then vanished. Panic began to rise again, but no missiles came. There was no error in the code. No radar malfunction. Just blinking ghosts. Engineers tore the systems apart, line by line, bit by bit, but they never found the source, a glitch, a data echo, or something else. To this day, it remains unsolved. And so the report labeled it cause unknown. Some said it was just electromagnetic interference. Others whispered darker theories, hacked data lines, cosmic rays, solar flares. But deep down, no one knew. And that terrified them. Because how do you prepare for the threat you can't see? In 1983, it happened again. But this time, it wasn't in America. It was in a Soviet bunker, where Colonel Stanislav Petrov was on duty. His screen lit up, 5 missiles, inbound. Alarms rang. Panic grew, but outside, there was only silence. Petrov had seen drills before, but this felt different. Too perfect, too clean. Something inside him said, this isn't real. So he waited. Minutes passed. The missiles never arrived. Later they found the cause. The satellites had misread sunlight reflected off clouds, sunlight mistaken for missiles. A glitch in the sky, a war nearly launched. By a sunset. The lesson: even the best machines see ghosts. They misread, they hallucinate, and when we trust them blindly, we gamble everything. On a blinking screen, ghost alerts don't always come from machines. Sometimes, they come from people. Misread orders, false alarms, wrong translations, an operator sneezing during a code check. Yes, that really happened. In 1981, someone sneezed and triggered an alert. The system interpreted the sudden noise as a distress signal, Protocols activated, launch sequences warmed. It took a full 47 seconds to cancel the order. By then, 17 jet fighters were already airborne, all because of a sneeze. So you see, history is fragile, not just because of weapons, but because of static, because of buttons too close together, because someone mistyped or sneezed, or believed a reflection in the clouds. We think of history as made by great men, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's made by tired men who press the right button at the right time, or choose not to press anything at all. History rarely explodes. More often, it almost does. It leans toward disaster, then stops. A breath held, a finger hovering, a voice that says, wait. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, a Soviet submarine was trapped by US forces. Depth charges shook the hull. The crew believed war had begun. Inside, it was chaos. No radio contact with Moscow. No sunlight for days. Sweat, exhaustion, tension. The captain prepared to launch a nuclear torpedo. But there was one officer who said no. Vasily Arkhipov. He refused to authorize. One voice, against two. Enough to stop it. He may have saved 100 million lives. And you've likely never heard his name. In 1979, again US radar showed a massive Soviet strike. Pilots were sent to their jets. Bombers rolled to runway. ICBM crews unlocked safes. Orders were seconds away. Then someone noticed. The radar map matched exactly with a training exercise run weeks before. The simulation file had been reloaded by mistake. Again, a full global strike halted by a memory, not a missile, not a gun, just a technician who recognized a file name. In 1995, a scientific rocket launched from Norway, a peaceful mission to study the aurora, but Russia's radar read it as a US nuclear missile. Within 8 minutes, Russia's President Boris Yeltsin opened his nuclear briefcase. He was ready. The world was one shaky hand away from fire. But then, no second missile came. No impact, nothing. The briefcase was closed. The world exhaled. These weren't wars, they were echoes, warnings of what could be. The world's nerves, twitching. False starts, near misses, unwritten wars. Pages that almost made history books, but didn't because someone whispered, not yet. There was a time when children practiced hiding under desks. Sirens howled across American suburbs, once a week, every week. Not for tornadoes, not for fires, but for missiles. It was normal, it was routine, it was countdown culture. Homes had fallout shelters. Families stocked canned beans, manual radios, and Geiger counters. Some even bought maps to guess which cities would be hit first. Survival became a hobby, or a prayer. In 1959, a US pamphlet read, after the bombs, stay calm, remain indoors, avoid dust, boil water, wait for further instructions. As if that would be enough. They built hope into bunkers, painted optimism on concrete, children's toys beside iodine tablets, board games next to flashlights, a life underground, rehearsed in silence. Every major city had air raid sirens, hidden in churches, on rooftops, at schools. Some are still there today, resting, forgotten, waiting for a signal that never came. TV shows aired what to do guides. Movies imagined life after the blast. In some, people rebuilt. In others, they simply withered, always in silence, always in ash. In 1947, the clock was first set at 7 minutes to midnight. By the 1980s, it stood at 3. In 2023, 90 seconds. It's not a real clock, but it measures something real. Our fear, our failure, our thin grip on peace. It doesn't tick, but it reminds. What kind of world builds a countdown instead of a solution? What kind of culture teaches its children not to live, but to wait? We learn to count backward. We learn to measure time in sirens, in seconds left, in flashpoints, and how long it might take for a city to vanish. And yet, we survived through fear, through drills, through silence, because someone always said, wait. because the clock never struck 12. So tonight, you rest in a world still ticking, still scared, still waiting, but still here. And that matters. What makes us build missiles? Not just fear, but pride. A belief that strength keeps us safe. That if we can end the world, no one will dare to start anything. We call it balance, mutual assured destruction. If I destroy you, and you destroy me, then no one wins. No one dares. It worked, mostly, but it was always a bluff. A poker game with billions of lives in the pot, and everyone holding trembling cards. We placed too much faith in deterrence, too little in empathy. We built stronger bombs, smarter warheads, but rarely asked, why are we doing this? Behind the policies were people, presidents, generals, advisors, each with their own doubts, their own nightmares, their own children asleep in other rooms. You might think world leaders are cold. Some are, but most are just scared. Scared of looking weak, scared of losing face, scared of pressing the wrong button. In 1961, during a routine patrol, a US bomber accidentally dropped 2 nuclear bombs over North Carolina. One of them armed itself. Only one tiny switch stopped detonation. That switch, smaller than a paperclip, was the only thing between that town and complete erasure. Human error, saved by luck. How many close calls can we survive? How many times can pride hold back fear? How many people must hesitate before one does not? We often think of peace as a natural state. It's not. It's fragile. A choice we must remake every single day. It doesn't come from treaties or threats. It comes from moments, tiny moments, when someone chooses patience over panic. Maybe that's what makes us human, not strength, not power, but doubt and the ability to stop, to wonder, to wait. Tonight, as you lie here, your body sinking into stillness, remember this: you are the descendant of 1,000 choices to not destroy. You exist because someone said not yet, because a hand paused, because a file was double-checked, because we feared enough to survive. You live on the edge of history. You always have. Even when the world feels calm, there are wires humming, satellites watching, alerts ready. The edge never disappears. But we forget, we sleep, we dream. We kiss our children goodnight and trust that the sky will not fall. We live as if tomorrow will come. That is bravery. Not the soldier in the trench, not the president in the bunker, but the child who draws flowers in a notebook while sirens sleep. You've heard about bombs, about buttons, about blinking lights, but let's talk about something quieter. Stillness, a heartbeat, a breath, a pause before dawn. Even in the darkest days, someone made coffee, someone watered a plant, someone pressed play on a slow jazz record and let it run to the end. That's how the world survives, not with power, but with routine, with people doing small things on the edge of big ones. You are part of that rhythm. Your sleep tonight is part of resistance to chaos, to fear, to noise. Let yourself go now. Let your thoughts drift. You are not responsible for the sky. You are not the one holding the key. You are here, alive, safe, enough. The world may tremble, warnings may flash, but somewhere, someone will pause, and the sun will rise, and the wind will blow, and you wake again. Until then, sleep, not as escape, but as power, as rebellion against worry, as peace. Refusing to surrender, sleep dreamer, because the world still spins, and for now, that is enough. There are cities that were never meant to survive, places marked quietly on classified maps, targets, not towns, not homes, not laughter, just coordinates, just dots in a strategy, awaiting erasure. New York, Moscow, Beijing, London, San Francisco, each had a warhead with its name on it, sometimes 5, sometimes more, all of them waiting in silence. If the world had ended in 1983, you would not be hearing this. You would not be lying in bed. There would be no pillows, no soft sheets, no slow jazz playing in the background, just ash or absence. Cities were not just buildings. They were rhythms, markets opening, feet walking to school, coffee cups clinking, keys turning indoors. All of it could have vanished in 7 minutes or less. Some cities built bunkers, most did not. Some had sirens, most just hoped. Some prayed, others simply forgot. There was a man who lived in Berlin who once said, "I used to look at the sky every day, wondering if it would be the last one I saw. Now I just water my plants." The skies watched back. Satellites, spy planes, early warning systems. But in the end, it wasn't the sky that saved us. It was the people under it. Cities breathe like people. They tense, they rest, they remember. Some walls still hold echoes of fear. Some parks were once target zones, but people picnic there now. Somewhere in Kansas, there's a field that used to hide a missile. Now it grows sunflowers, and no one passing by would ever know how close the ground once came to fire. Cities survive because people do, and people survive because we choose life. Even when the countdown hums, even when the threat whispers, we build homes anyway. We plant trees anyway. So tonight, as your own city quiets, as windows go dark, one by one know this. You are sleeping in a place that was once marked for ending, and yet, you are here. Some sounds stay with us. The shriek of a siren, the hollow thud of a test blast, the hum of fluorescent lights in bunkers. But the most haunting sound is silence. The pause between alerts, the breath between decisions. In early warning centers, you could hear everything. The clicking of keyboards, the soft crunch of shoes on tile, the murmur of radios in foreign tongues. And then, one word on the screen, incoming, and everything stopped. During drills, school children were told, when you hear the siren, get under your desk, cover your head, and wait. No one told them what to do. When the siren didn't stop, in the Nevada desert, they tested bombs. People in Las Vegas watched the mushroom clouds rise, some with cocktails in hand. The shockwave came, a full minute later. First the flash, then the thunder. The sound of a nuclear test is not like thunder. It's deeper, more final. The earth doesn't crack, it groans, and the air folds in on itself. Some say it's like the sky, collapsing. But not all sound was violent. In bunkers, there was music. Soldiers listened to tapes. Elvis, Sinatra, Chopin. The world might end, but the needle still dropped. On side A, some operators said they could tell how bad the alert was by how quiet the room became. Not screaming, not panic, just absolute stillness. The kind that only comes when lives are being measured in seconds. In the 1990s, a Russian commander sat in a room with blinking lights. He described the moment the alarm rang as a sound too loud to hear. His body moved, but his mind stopped. And yet, after every near miss, the same sounds return. Birds chirping, city buses rumbling, a door unlocking, someone boiling tea. The world resuming its rhythm, as if nothing had happened. That is the sound of survival, not the roar of defiance, but the return of the ordinary, the whisper of wind through trees, the creak of an old chair, the deep breath before sleep. Some stories never made the news, some were never written down, but they lived in the quiet thoughts of men and women, waiting for something terrible that never came. There was a soldier stationed near a missile silo in Montana. Each night he wrote to his daughter. He never mailed the letters, he just left them in a shoebox, under his bunk, just in case. In one he wrote, "If I ever have to turn the key, I want you to know, it wasn't because I wanted to. It was because I thought it might keep you safe. But God, I hope I never do." In Moscow, a young radar technician kept a small notebook. He doodled during night shifts, drawings of birds, cats, people walking on one page. He wrote, "If the screen ever flashes red, I will close my eyes before I speak." A woman in London, 1962, wrote her fiancé every week. He was deployed. She never sent the final letter it read. "If war starts tomorrow, I want you to remember how you laughed at pigeons, how your tea always got cold. That's how I will remember you." There's a kind of love that never gets said aloud because saying it would make it too real. too painful, too final. So it stays in notepads, in locked drawers, in unsent drafts. Imagine a child in Hiroshima, 1945, drawing clouds on a paper fan. She doesn't know what's coming. She never finishes the drawing. The fan is found years later, buried in ash. History is filled with things we almost said, goodbyes whispered, 2 empty rooms, apologies rehearsed, but never delivered. A silence before the siren, a pause before the button. You might think these stories are sad, but they're not. They're proof that even at the edge of war, humans still feel, still love, still write, even if the letter never leaves the page. So tonight, as the world turns quietly, somewhere, someone is writing, not for glory, not for history, but because words deserve to exist, even if no one reads them. There are moments in history where everything slows down. The world keeps spinning, but people stop. They hold their breath, they wait, they watch the second hand tick once, and not again. In 1983, when Petrov saw the alert, he stared at it for 23 seconds. That's all, less than half a minute. But he would later say, it felt like an hour, like the world was frozen, waiting for me. Inside a missile silo, a launch code takes less than 30 seconds to enter, but the weight of that code can stretch time. Fingers hover, hearts pound, and every sound becomes unbearable. There was a pilot in a bomber, midway over the Arctic. He was told to wait. No word came. 5 full minutes of silence. He would later describe it as the longest 5 minutes of my life. Time doesn't stop, but we do. In fear, indecision, in awe. Moments stretch, not because the clock changes, but because we do. After the Cuban Missile Crisis ended, a man in Washington sat on a park bench for 6 hours. Didn't move, didn't speak. When asked why, he said, I just needed time to start again. When a false alert hit Hawaii in 2018, phones screamed, ballistic missile inbound. This is not a drill. For 38 minutes, people called loved ones, wrote goodbyes, and waited. Time bent. When the all clear came, people wept. Not out of joy, but because their hearts had been frozen in place for nearly 40 minutes. Time had paused, and they didn't know how to start it again. We measure time in seconds, but memory doesn't. It remembers tension, stillness, eyes locked on screens, breaths held for too long, moments when the world almost stopped. Tonight, as your clock ticks quietly, remember, you're here, because others once paused, because someone held time in their hands, and chose not to let it fall. History is full of battles, but it's also full of silences, of missiles never launched, planes never given clearance, orders written, then locked away. We rarely tell those stories, but we should. In 1995, a Norwegian scientific rocket triggered alarms. Across Russia's nuclear command, they thought it was an American strike. Yeltsin opened the nuclear codes, then waited and did nothing. The rocket passed. No war followed. In 1960, a satellite glitch told the US that hundreds of Soviet missiles were inbound. The system screamed. Sirens rose. Bombers warmed up. Then someone asked, why would they launch during a snowstorm? The system was wrong. They stood down. In 1983, Soviet satellites picked up what looked like 5 missiles. The man watching Petrov should have called it in, but he didn't. He said, if this were real, there'd be more than 5. And so, he waited and saved the world. We remember wars, but forget what we avoided. A nuclear detonation in Berlin, avoided. A strike on Cuba, avoided. A retaliation across the Arctic, called off at the last second. Someone once calculated that the world has come within 90 seconds of nuclear war over a dozen times. Each time, we were pulled back, not by systems, but by people, and by doubt. There are no medals for wars that didn't happen, no monuments for missiles never fired, no history books for countdowns interrupted, but maybe there should be. There's something beautiful about what didn't happen. It means someone, somewhere, chose stillness, chose to breathe, chose not to escalate, chose peace. You are alive because of what didn't occur, because a button wasn't pressed, because fear was overcome by restraint. That is history too, unwritten but very real. So tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember, you are a child of quiet decisions, of skipped attacks, of missiles never flown. You are a product of the things that didn't happen. Not all soldiers wear uniforms. Some are made of wires, steel, cold code. They don't eat, they don't sleep. They just wait for a signal, a light, a code, and then destruction. In underground silos, missiles sit upright, encased in concrete and time. Some haven't moved in 50 years, but their systems are tested every week. Silent giants, ready in under 60 seconds. They have names: Minuteman, Topol, Trident, Peacekeeper. Names that sound calm, even hopeful, but their purpose is not peace, it is finality. Airborne systems patrol endlessly. Doomsday planes circle skies 24/7. Their job is simple: stay alive long enough to send the signal that ends everything. In Colorado, beneath a mountain, a command center glows. Monitors flash, keyboards click. Every moment, computers scan the sky for shadows that don't belong. These machines don't hate, they don't fear, they don't hope. They just execute if told to, if asked, if the code is valid and the order is clear. One wire out of place, one misread signal, one human typing the wrong character. That's all it takes for them to wake up, to act, and never go back to sleep again. There's beauty in their silence, in their stillness. For decades they've waited, not because we love peace, but because we fear what they can do. Some say we've made ourselves slaves to our own machines, that we built gods out of circuits and steel, and now we live beneath their quiet judgment. But tonight, they sleep buried deep, blinking patiently. And as long as no one speaks the terrible word, they will keep waiting, and the sky will remain unbroken. There are places on this planet where the earth still remembers, not in words but in silence. Cracked stone, twisted trees, soil that hums faintly under a Geiger counter, echoes that never left. In the Nevada desert, craters bloom like scars. Over 900 nuclear tests were conducted there, some underground, some not. The sand turned to glass, the air. At Semipalatinsk in Kazakhstan, they tested bombs for 40 years. Villages nearby watched the sky light up. No warning, no shelter, just a flash, then sickness, then silence. Bikini Atoll, a tropical paradise, until it wasn't. The US tested 23 bombs there. Fish floated up, cooked. The ocean glowed. People were told they could return. They never did. There's a word for radioactive soil. Hot zones, hot islands, hot lakes. But they don't burn your skin. They burn your cells. Slowly, quietly. Animals returned. Birds nested in scorched trees. Wolves roamed old bunkers. Life crept back into forbidden zones. But people stayed away because some echoes are too loud to walk through. In Hiroshima, the shadows stayed, etched into stone. A man on steps, a ladder against a wall, preserved not by light, but by absence. The heat erased him. The stone remembered. In Chernobyl, it wasn't war, but the effect was similar. Abandoned homes, toys left mid-play, clocks forever frozen. At 1:23 a.m., time stopped, but the radiation didn't. We buried our weapons, we burned our skies, and then we walked away. Not out of guilt, but because the land would not forgive us. It whispered, no more. So tonight, as the ground beneath you lies still, know that somewhere, deep in deserts, on forgotten islands, and cracked cement, the earth remembers, and still echoes. Every age leaves something behind. The Iron Age left tools, the Industrial Age left smoke, the Atomic Age, it left fear, warning signs, steel doors, and stories, half told, half whispered, half believed. There are bunkers under cities, sealed and silent, maps on walls, cots still made, canned food long expired, a layer of dust, on a clipboard that says, Final Readiness, 1987, then, nothing. Some children grew up knowing what DEFCON meant before they could spell peace. They played games about surviving blasts. They learned to duck and cover before they learned long division. In museums now, you can see Geiger counters, civil defense posters, brochures that say, "Survive the bomb." But they sit behind glass, safe, untouched, as if that era is over. But the missiles still wait. We built monuments to what might have been Cold War parks. Retired silos, photos of mushroom clouds, printed on t-shirts. It feels distant like fiction, but it wasn't. Some of the men who built the bombs regretted it. One wrote, "I didn't think about the cities. I just wanted the math to work." He died in silence. The equation still sits in a textbook. We leave behind more than structures. We leave behind tension, inherited fear, a background hum in the collective mind. What if it happens again? Even if no one says it aloud, in old diaries, you'll find entries like, "Had lunch, read paper, thought about the end of the world again." Casual, accepted, normal, because that's what we were taught. Be ready, but don't panic. What we leave behind is not just warnings. We leave behind choices. Times we said no, times we paused, times we chose not to act, and survived. So tonight, as another day ends quietly, remember, your world is built on restraint, on wisdom, on doubt, and on millions of people who chose to wait. The future doesn't come with fanfare. It arrives quietly, like sleep, like dawn. It doesn't knock, it doesn't shout, it simply becomes. Some people imagine the future as metal and fire, flying cars, digital mines, skies full of drones. But the real future is softer. It's a child holding a warm cup. It's silence, without fear. The missiles are still here. The systems still run, but so do the gardens, the trains, the songs, the laughter after dinner. The world continues, not because we fixed everything, but because we refused to stop. People still build bunkers, but they also build playgrounds. Someone somewhere is installing a swing set right now, not knowing how close we once came to ending it all. In a small school in Iceland, kids are learning about history. The teacher says Cold War, and a hand goes up. Was it really that dangerous? The teacher smiles and simply says, "Yes, but we're still here." Not every threat needs to be destroyed. Some just need to be endured, outlived. Let time pass over them. Like water smoothing stone, the bombs sleep, so do we. The best part of the future is that it's boring, ordinary, full of dishes to wash, shoes to tie, messages left unread. It means the world is still here, and that matters. The future is a man forgetting why he was afraid. It's a woman laughing at the wrong moment. In a documentary, it's people reclaiming silence, not because they fear it, but because they've earned it. Maybe that's what peace really is. Not fireworks, not parades, just the absence of alarms, just stillness, without tension, just sleep, without the shadow of endings. So tonight, as you drift away, know this: the future is already here. It's in your breath, your heartbeat, your stillness, and it is quiet. Above us, far beyond the clouds, drift the bones of old machines, satellites no longer sending, radars no longer listening, antennas folded in silence. They once watched the world for signs of its ending, now they just float. In low Earth orbit, there's a satellite launched in 1967. It was meant to track missile launches. It hasn't worked since 1984, but it's still up there, a ghost with a metal skin, watching nothing. In Siberia, a radar station was abandoned in 1993. The screens cracked, moss climbed the walls, yet deep inside, one green light still blinked for years, waiting for a signal that never came. In Greenland, there's an early warning station, buried in ice. It once scanned the sky every second. Now it hums quietly, forgotten, as snow falls over memories of fear. Not all ruins are stone. Some hang weightless, wrapped in solar panels and broken code. They drift across the stars. Reminders that even paranoia can leave artifacts, space junk, They call it thousands of pieces. Once part of systems designed to protect, to detect, to destroy. Now they're just shadows. Crossing the moonlight, one satellite was programmed to detect infrared launches. It now spins uselessly, but once, its blinking red eye almost triggered a war. It misread sunlight as missiles. The sky remembers. It holds more than stars. It holds wreckage. Wreckage of fear, of suspicion, of strategies built on seconds. And yet, those machines never fired. If you look up tonight, you won't see them, but they're there, floating, fading, peacefully decaying, in silence, witnesses. Two wars that never were. So sleep easy. The sky is no longer watching you. Its guardians are tired. Its sirens long shut off. Now it holds only cold stars, old metal, and the hush of survival. Some mistakes are harmless, a typo, a wrong turn, a forgotten name. But during the Cold War, a mistake could mean the end. Not from evil, not from malice, just from being human. In 1979, a training tape was accidentally played at NORAD's early warning center. The screen lit up, full-scale nuclear attack. Jets scrambled, missiles primed. Then someone realized it wasn't real. It was practice. Wrong tape. In 1980, a faulty computer chip in Arkansas triggered an alert. More than 2,000 warheads went on high readiness. The error, a single transistor costing 46 cents. One radar operator once mistook a flock of geese for an incoming missile wave. The blips on the screen matched. He reported it. Higher command hesitated. Then someone said, "Geese don't usually start wars." False alarms weren't rare. One general said, "I stopped trusting the system when it told me we were under attack from the sun." It was a solar flare. Cables were chewed by rats, switches stuck in humidity, keyboards jammed by coffee spills. For all our power, it turned out, the biggest threat to the world was often an engineer's lunch. There's something deeply human about it all. We built machines to end everything, then forgot to label the wires, built bunkers that flooded, trained people who forgot their login codes. History remembers leaders, strategies, weapons, but sometimes what saved the world was a janitor unplugging the wrong monitor, or someone saying, "That doesn't look right." So tonight, as systems sleep and cities glow, know this: the world didn't end, not because we were perfect, but because we weren't, because our last mistake never happened. Even in the shadow of the end of the world, humans laughed, not because they weren't afraid, but because laughter is defiance. It says, "You can scare me, but I still remember how to smile." During drills, children hid under desks, then whispered jokes. They made faces. One boy called it duck and giggle, because even when the sirens wailed, kids were still kids. Soldiers guarding missile silos played cards between alerts. They told ghost stories under fluorescent lights. One wrote in his journal, "If I die tomorrow, at least I beat Dan at poker tonight." In Moscow, an officer once joked, "If we push the button, we better be first in line for the afterlife cafeteria." They laughed quietly, because what else can you do when holding the end? TV shows made fun of fallout shelters. Cartoons had ducks dodging bombs. Comedians joked about radiation glowing in the dark. We wrapped fear in humor, because it was the only wrapping paper we had. A technician once taped a sign above the launch console. "Don't panic unless this sign is on fire." No one took it down. It stayed there for 12 years. In one base, someone brought a cat. They named it Mutually Assured Destruction, MAD for short. It slept on the control panel. Everyone agreed, if MAD stepped on the wrong button, they'd blame the cat. Humor didn't erase danger, but it softened it, took its teeth out. Laughter made the unbearable bearable, and the unbearable was daily life. We weren't laughing because it was funny. We laughed because it was ridiculous, because living at the edge of extinction and still showing up for work is the most human thing of all. So tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, remember, the world survived, not only on strategy, but on stories, on sarcasm, on soft smiles, in concrete rooms. Once, we built towers to watch for missiles, giant radars, concrete silos, underground cities. They were symbols of power, of fear, of readiness. Now, grass grows through the cracks. Rust spreads. The silence is louder than any alarm once was. In Montana, there's a missile field no longer active. The fences remain, but the cameras are gone. A hawk lives atop the launch door. It doesn't know what was beneath its talons. It just flies and feeds. The past sleeps quietly under dirt. Near the Black Sea, a naval base stands empty. Barnacles crust the hulls of ships that will never sail again. Walls once echoing with shouts now hear only wind. The sea takes back what men built for war and leaves behind only salt. Inside an old bunker in Ukraine, someone once etched "We were ready" on the wall. No date, no name, just those words. The ink has faded. Mold creeps across the concrete, but the message still whispers when the flashlight passes slowly over it. In New Mexico, the first atomic bomb was tested. Today, the ground is quiet. There's a plaque, some glass fused by fire. Tourists take photos, not feeling the heat that once turned night into day. The dust remembers, but says nothing. Statues crumble, memorials wear down. Even the symbols of war erode. But memory clings not to stone, but to air, to stories, to the hush that comes when someone says, "This is where the world could have ended," and someone else nods, softly. A warhead weighs several tons, but fear weighs more. Yet fear, too, fades. What once was urgent becomes historical. What once kept presidents awake at 3 a.m. becomes an exhibit under glass. And the glass gathers dust. Nothing lasts forever. Not generals, not systems, not threats. We think power is permanent, but even empires rust. Even codes are forgotten. Even bunkers flood. What we once called unbreakable, time calls temporary. One day, someone will walk past a hill and not know a missile once slept beneath it. They'll admire the flowers, the shape of the clouds, the warmth of the breeze, and the land will say nothing, because some silence is earned. So tonight, as you sleep beneath the ceiling of stars, know this: the world has buried its weapons, not because it was told to, but because all things fear included, turned to dust. And from dust we build quieter monuments. History remembers the loud ones, the leaders, the shouters. But sometimes, the most important people were quiet. A technician who hesitated, a commander who asked one more question, a courier who delivered a wrong message. Just in time, Stanislav Petrov was told the US had launched 5 missiles. The system confirmed it. Protocol demanded retaliation, but he paused. He didn't press the button. He said, "I don't trust the system." And because of that sentence, you are alive. In 1961, a B-52 carrying 2 nuclear bombs crashed over North Carolina. One bomb's parachute deployed, the other nearly detonated. A single faulty switch worth 69 cents stopped a nuclear blast. The man who found the bomb later cried, alone. A Norwegian scientist launched a rocket to study the northern lights, but the rocket's path mimicked a US nuclear missile. Russian radar lit up. The briefcase with nuclear codes was opened, but Yeltsin waited 10 minutes. Then, nothing. An American radar operator once misread a flock of geese as a Soviet attack. He hesitated, called it in. But before action was taken, someone cracked a joke. Unless those birds have warheads. That laughter might have saved a city. A Soviet submarine commander was surrounded by US ships during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Cut off from radio, under pressure. He was told to launch a nuclear torpedo. 2 officers said yes. One said no. That one was Vasily. None of these men became presidents. Their names aren't in monuments. They died quietly, sometimes poor, often alone. But their choice is quiet, stubborn, doubtful echo, more than speeches. They saved a world that never knew it was in danger. One day, a young boy asked his grandfather, "Did you ever fight in a war?" The old man said, "No, I just pressed pause." The boy didn't understand, but one day, he might. To be almost a legend is to step into fire, then step back, to be forgotten by headlines, but remembered by silence. These people didn't want medals, they just wanted to sleep without nightmares. So tonight, as you drift to sleep, remember this. You owe your life to someone who doubted protocol, to someone who asked, "What if it's wrong?" and walked away from disaster. It wasn't cold like December. It was colder, more silent, more dangerous. Not the kind you feel on your skin, but in your bones, in policy, in protocol. The Cold War wasn't about snow. It was about silence. Two nations stared at each other, through satellites, through suspicion. They never touched, they never shouted directly, but every whisper was a weapon. Every delay felt like a countdown. Children drew pictures of mushroom clouds. Their parents called it reality. News anchors practiced saying goodbye without panicking. Some towns built sirens, others just prayed. The cold wasn't outside, it was in phone calls, in headlines, in quiet meetings where generals argued over maps. Without cities, just dots. Dots meant to vanish in under 30 minutes. In schools, teachers taught arithmetic, then how to recognize fallout symptoms: coughing, bleeding gums, hair loss. One child asked, "Will this be on the test?" The teacher didn't answer. The cold was in the handshake. That didn't happen. In the letter that was never opened. In the silence after the red phone rang. But no one picked it up, because silence was safer than speaking. At sea, submarines passed within miles. Men stared through periscopes, knowing one wrong move could turn oceans into ashtrays. But they stayed silent. They stayed cold. At air bases, pilots slept near their jets, boots on, ready to fly in 3 minutes. Not to win, not to land, just to release, then vanish. A general once said, "We don't plan for victory, we plan for survival." That's not strategy, that's fear in uniform. And fear wears many medals. This cold didn't freeze bodies, it froze conversation, froze policy. It kept a world intact by wrapping it in frost, not peace, just pause. So when they say, "It was cold back then," they don't mean weather, they mean rooms full of maps, drawers full of launch codes, hearts full of dread. And yet, in that cold, some people still fell in love, made music, watched the stars, not because it was warm, but because they refused to go numb. Maybe that's the real victory. Not that we survived the Cold War, but that we did so without losing the heat in our hearts. So tonight, as the room grows still, remember, you're not cold anymore, and the world is no longer waiting to burn, only waiting to rest. Some of the loudest moments in history weren't sirens or screams. They were the seconds right after the alarm stopped, after the screen went dark, after someone said, "Wait, that silence?" That's where everything balanced. Imagine a control room, flashing lights. A voice says, "Possible launch detected." Then nothing, just the humming of machines. The shallow breath of a soldier, too afraid to blink, waiting for the next sound, or no sound at all. One technician said, the scariest part wasn't the alarm, it was when it stopped, because silence meant two things. Either it was a glitch, or it was real, and the end was simply delayed. In homes across the world, people heard test sirens then. Nothing, no news, no explosion, just a quiet too sharp to trust. Dinner paused, breath held, fingers crossed. That silence was filled with imagined mushroom clouds, with countdowns, with prayers, with "I should have called my mother." It was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. Pilots sat in cockpits, waiting for the green light, but the light never came. Just the low hum of fuel systems, and the ticking of watches. Time passed like syrup, slow, heavy, hopeful. A base in Alaska once received a partial alert, half the message loaded. No one knew if it was real, so they waited for 22 minutes doing nothing, because sometimes doing nothing saves everything. Even birds stopped flying during alerts. Animals knew. Nature paused, not because it feared the bomb, but because it felt our attention vibrating through concrete and steel. There are tapes, recordings of rooms where someone whispered, "Do we launch?" And another voice, barely audible, said, "Not yet." Between sirens there were cups of coffee, shaky hands, eyes watching clocks and hearts, begging time to slow down, just long enough to survive the silence. In those moments, the world held its breath, and somehow, someone always chose not to exhale in destruction. Silence in the right moment is louder than any bomb. It's the sound of restraint, of wisdom, of survival. They don't write songs about silence, but maybe they should, because the quiet between tragedies is where we kept choosing to stay alive. One general wrote in his notes, "There was no sound, just a red dot blinking, and my heart beating louder than the siren had." It's easy to dramatize action, but the Cold War wasn't made of action. It was made of hesitation, of waiting, of cold coffee, and sweating hands, hovering over keyboards. The silence didn't mean peace. It meant pause, a delicate thread between yesterday and never again. So when you hear nothing, no siren, no voice, no warning, remember, that's not emptiness. That's a decision, not to end things. And tonight, in your own silence, know this. You live in the echoes of silences that saved everything. We spend so much time telling stories of what went wrong, wars that were fought, tragedies that exploded. But sometimes, the most important story is the one where nothing happened, because someone chose silence, chose calm, chose not to strike. The Cold War could have ended the world, but it didn't. Not because we were wise, not because we were lucky, but because again and again, someone paused, someone blinked, someone stepped back, when they could have stepped forward. There are no holidays for wars that didn't start, no statues for disasters that were prevented, but those quiet victories, those invisible triumphs, built the world you're sleeping in tonight. Maybe that's what peace really is. Not loud, not obvious, just a long string of days where the sirens stayed silent and the clocks kept ticking and people went on, loving, failing, and hoping. The heroes of this story were flawed, tired, lonely, sometimes scared, but they chose not to burn the sky, and for that, we owe them dreams, not medals, just rest. You've walked through shadows tonight, through decisions and disasters that almost were, and yet, you're still here, because the end was postponed by people you'll never meet. So now, as your breath slows, as the world softens, you can let go. The stories are finished, the ghosts are quiet, and the night belongs to sleep. Tomorrow will come, gently, quietly, not as a warning, but as a gift. You've made it through, the sky didn't fall, and now, you rest.